Hello, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another episode of the Classics Show. I am your host, Shabnum, Riaz. Today we have a very special program for you, and something that's very close to my heart, actually. We're going to talk about children's literature, and what I think is that, living in Pakistan, we invest in a lot in our children. We invest in their education. We invest in so much, but children's literature, how much is being done there? Who's working for them? Who has their interests in mind? Because it's so important to shape those young minds at that time. So we're very, very happy to have with us in our studios today Selma Tufail, who is a professor with a background in art, literature and linguistics. But one of the best things is she's also an author of a children's book.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show. And it is something that's very important to me. My children grew up on all sorts of literature from around the world. They lived in different countries, and it helped shape them, and it helped them to become the international citizens that they are.
Right.
And I feel stories are very, very important in shaping our children's.
Absolutely. And before we go on, this is Selma's book. It's also illustrated by her as well, When Chickens Fly and Other Tales. Now, Selma, tell me, you have a very interesting story about this. You said you wrote this for your grandchildren.
Yes, yes. I do not have any grandchildren.
Yet.
Yet, but I live in hope, and it is for my grandchildren. All the stories have messages I want them to know.
Right.
I want them to live based on these sort of messages. And so, yes, when my children come, grandchildren come, the book is ready for them.
It's ready for
them.
The
stories are there.
So, with a background in literature and linguistics, and you've been writing articles that have been published as well, what made you change tracks and come to children's literature? What was the inspiration behind that?
Well, a few years ago, I was asked to teach a course for the University of California in Irvine, and it was a course for lifelong learners called The Movement of Human Thought Through Stories. And so we looked at all kinds of stories from around the world, fairy tales, stories of creation, all sorts of stories. And as we went through them, some of the things we looked at were why do we tell stories? That was the basic. Why do we tell stories?
That's such an important question, and hardly anyone really thinks about that.
Yes. And there was a lot of discussion in the classroom because a lot of the students were very mature. My oldest student was 92. And she had a lot to contribute. So, yeah, that was the thing.
She must have had fascinating comments there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It was nice. And we came up with all sorts of theories about why we tell stories. And I think the essence of that whole course throughout the semester was that we tell stories to help understand the human condition and to ensure human survival. And that was, even though we were all elderly, we all grew up on fairy tales, we all grew up on children's stories, but then once we started looking at it objectively, they are all about human survival and how we need to behave, how we need to live to make sure that we live effectively in our communities. And so once I read the stories, once we discussed the fairy tales, another thing came to light was that many of them are redundant. They are redundant. And so I thought, I have to make something more relevant. I have to write something relevant that my grandchildren can relate to. They cannot relate to Cinderella. They cannot relate to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They need something real.
Need something like that. That's such an important point, actually, isn't it? To provide something for our children, or as you said, grandchildren as well, that it will keep them, they will have that element of identification, of relevance, of understanding that this connects. Because again, as you mentioned, fairy tales. I remember the the argument that used to go on between my mother and father. Because my father used to, bring me lots of books for bedtime stories that we used to have every night. And while there were, lots of encyclopedias and non-fiction and fiction, there was also fairy tales. And my mother didn't like the fact that I was being read fairy tales, and she would always challenge the whole concept behind the fairy tales. In fact, I agree to this part that why must there always be a damsel in distress who needs to be rescued? Why can she not be a productive member of society who can take care of herself rather than causing so much trouble everywhere?
Yes, you're right. And if you look at that situation through the eyes of humans who want to keep their community alive, women bore the children. So in the past, when we didn't have medicine, we didn't have proper doctors, we weren't able to ensure the mortality rate of our children. It was important to keep the female in a protected area where she could bear and give birth. And the man would go out hunting and gathering and feed her, and then she would produce more children. So yes, in the days of the cavemen, in the Middle Ages, these stories may have been very relevant.
Exactly.
You keep the woman protected, don't let her go out. Keep her there so she can keep giving birth. But that's not how we are now.
So we've moved a long way away from that.
We are way beyond that sort of lifestyle.
So basically it's the instincts that are coming into play here that are developing this line of thought. So then it's challenging those instincts that were developed at that time for, the male to be protective of the female, and having the thought that she couldn't look after herself. And then that part of her perception being played upon in all these stories.
Yes, and I feel that we have gone beyond that element of, division of labor to ensure the survival of humankind. Now I think we can focus on the quality of our life. We can go beyond, let's have 20 children because maybe 5 will survive. Now we can have 2, and we can be sure that, God willing, they will survive. We have, and so now we can focus on the quality of our life. We have a brain that works. Boy children and girl children have brains equally powerful. We can now work on that, and I think we should work on that, and our stories should reflect that we have gone beyond this fear of extinction. We are now moving forward, and our children's stories don't reflect that. Not here, at least.
Right, exactly. So you made a very important point here. I'd like to ask you, when we look globally, we see that children's stories, children's books, there's a lot of effort being put in there. There's lots of publications. You have, many people who are enjoying to write for children, and you have different concepts as well for getting them to be familiar with the written word. Let's talk about Pakistan. Why aren't we seeing more people branching into writing for children, especially during their early years? And how do we encourage them? How do we bring this forward?
Yes, that is a bit of a sensitive subject. I've taught in Pakistan, I've taught all over the world. I feel that in Pakistan we place a lot of emphasis on academics.
True.
We don't really focus on literature that much, only in so much as it's a subject. You've got to memorize the plots and the character descriptions and, talk about Shakespeare, talk about, Robert Frost. But we don't focus on their development of creativity. And children need leisure too. They need their minds to expand. I think, and this is just my personal experience, by overloading them with academic subjects, we close off their brain into a box of facts and figures. We don't let it expand into a world which is limitless. We have the whole universe in our brains, but yet we somehow close our children's brains into those books which fit into their satchels. We need to give them storybooks to let their imagination be liberated, let them be creative, think new things. Creativity can only be developed through creativity.
So true.
You know, you can't create it through the sciences and mathematics, which are equally important, but they are important for one thing. Creativity is important for everything.
That's absolutely true. I agree with you absolutely 100%, because you know, the delight that a child will go through when they have a particular storybook in their hands and they're going through that and they want you to read it over and over again, you can actually connect with that joy that they're going through and what it means to them. And I think that's a wonderful expression of innocence and a wonderful expression of a child wanting to, as you said, further their imagination, because that's where they form so many critical thoughts in their mind as well. Now, let's also talk about the importance of literature, children's books, children's literature, in tackling sensitive issues as well. I mean, there's so much going on. Why aren't people being proactive and assertive in this way?
Well, sensitive issues such as bullying, I suppose, or I think it's a very, very useful way to talk about that, because you can't. My book uses animal characters, and the animals, while I maintain the characteristics of that species, I give them human characteristics so that children can relate. So if there is a character in my book being tricked or manipulated by this trickster spider, the child can relate to that without it being in their faces.
Too obvious, exactly.
Yes.
Do read us one of your, most.
Well, they all deal with different topics. And this one I like in particular. It's about a little rabbit who has, as all rabbits have, very good senses. And she's born with these senses to protect herself from being a prey.
Okay.
But then
again, that's symbolic.
That is symbolic because you are, and that is very symbolic for girls too, because girls are also preyed upon, and that's another reason why people want to keep them locked up, right?
So you are dealing with sensitive issues through your stories then?
Oh yes. Yeah, the stories should be able to be read on different levels.
Right, and interpreted differently.
Yes, and I think the underlying message is very sensitive in every single story.
Right.
But if you don't want to go that deep, you can just enjoy it for the plot and this nasty little spider who is tricking everybody.
There's something for everyone there.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah. But this little rabbit, she learns how to meditate by observing a woman who comes to the park to meditate.
Okay.
And so, this lady is called Tara. Tara comes to meditate in the park, and the little rabbit, Alatea, watches her, and she wants to see what she's doing. But she's afraid to do it because it means she's out in the open. And she's used to hiding in the bushes so that, she's not attacked.
Again, symbolic.
Again, exactly. So there's a little bit about this story. Sitting with Tara, Alatea felt safe, but she couldn't concentrate. Her eyes kept searching for hidden predators. Training her eyes to do things that didn't come naturally was difficult. But with time and practice, Alatea learnt to concentrate on beautiful things just for pleasure. But then, as she did it, you've got this trickster spider, Yancy, and he doesn't like the changing of the world as he sees it. Yancy was keeping a close eye on Alatea. He noticed that she hopped around the park fearlessly, more like a predator than the prey. Her rebellious attitude was quite worrying. Someone else is behind this, he muttered to himself. jackrabbits can't change like this on their own. He decided to keep investigating.
Oh, I love that.
So-
That has so many layers to it. I mean, exactly. So what you've very cleverly done is you've been able to project that to every age level. And the younger child will also identify. The older child will also understand the undertones that are there as well. And the adult will have many, many layers to go through. So I think that's a fantastic way of putting that forward. As you've described the prey, living in fear, the total mindset, the mindset has been challenged. It's the perception has been challenged. And that is what is the most important part about children's writing and reading, is it not?
I think so. I think that's what I want to do, change the mindset. I mean, the title, When Chickens Fly, that's a story about a chick who wants to fly with the seagulls. And instead of me writing about, you're born this way, you must stay this way, because that's the attitude. It's like, this is the way, this is the norm. This is the norm.
Yeah.
Girls stay at home. They have to be fearful because they will be
preyed upon.
Yes. And so you don't enjoy life because you're going to be preyed upon. But if you develop your strengths, if you are safe, why shouldn't you enjoy the world? Why shouldn't you? So my stories are not about the survival of the human race. It's about how the human race can enjoy a better quality of life if they stopped being so fearful.
That is absolutely fantastic. And, that is something that is so important. A person realizes that many a times you are just actually dealing with the shackles inside your own mind. And those are the ones that are holding you back.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, I read somewhere that our DNA records the experiences of our ancestors, our mothers. So our mothers' fears are passed on to us through our DNA.
That's not through
not necessarily.
Habit.
It can be through habit, but it's also scientifically passed on through your DNA.
Okay.
Because whatever you experience gets recorded in you. You're like a supercomputer. So any experience you have, it becomes a permanent part of who you are.
So then we're talking about mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers and
hence the stories, because we're talking about memory that's been passed on from cavemen's times.
Yeah.
We have to move beyond that. We cannot live with the memories if they're not relevant. Of course, we're not going to jump off a mountain and kill ourselves. That is also part of our memory. We are afraid of heights because we fear we will fall and die. We want to survive. Our brain is hardwired to survive. But there are some things which are now not as relevant as they used to be thousands of years ago. And that's what I would like us to move beyond.
Would you say that, even though we are investing so much in our children, if we spoke about education, academics, we're sort of missing the forest for the trees. Are we as focused as we should be with our children because we're focusing a lot on academics? Are we really mindful of the fact that they need these books, they need their imagination to be charged?
Yes, I completely agree with you. I think schools should have a different curricula for literature. I think the books, the stories that they read should be relevant to the times and the regions they live in. I know that when I studied literature in Pakistan, I got most of my education here. We studied American literature, British literature. I didn't fully grasp what it meant until I moved to the United States. And I think that in Pakistan there should be more writers writing for Pakistani children, so that they can...
That's a very important point you've raised there, the cultural relevance.
The cultural relevance. And even though these are for all children, I think that there should be a lot more local writers. because
Absolutely true.
you can watch cartoons from around the world and enjoy them, but how are we training our children? And then why do we complain that our children are not the way we want them to be? It's because we haven't focused enough on them when they were little.
That brings me to another important question, something we were also discussing before we came into the studio. We expect a lot from our children.
Yes, we do.
have many expectations, and we sort of, subconsciously or unknowingly want them to fit into a certain pattern or carry out their life in a certain way. In our part of the world, I mean, I'm speaking globally, but in our part of the world, we seem to do this more than needed. How can we give our children space?
Well, once we become conscious of why we do things, and again, this goes back to our survival, learning to live in a community. We have I think we've taken it a bit too far. There's a balance between learning to live in a community so you can support each other and protect each other and flourish. But then if you take it too far, there's no room for creativity, there's no room for development, you've kind of boxed yourself in. And I think, I haven't lived here for a while. I see a lot of changes, it makes me very happy. I see a lot of women in the workforce, which didn't happen when I was here. But I do believe that we need to focus on why we try to fit our children into boxes, and why we can't let them be free. It is fear. It's always fear.
Fear is driving us insane. We really do address it. Okay, we're having a fantastic conversation right now. We'll be right back after this break. Don't change the channel. Okay, welcome back to the program. Yes, we've been having a fantastic time speaking to Selma here and talking about children's literature, and you've just recently published this fantastic book, and it's just so heartwarming to see people who are going that extra mile and thinking about our children and what they need. And because I've also written a book as well, I'm also a children's author, I can so connect with everything that you're doing, and that desire to be able to speak to them in the language that they want to hear.
Exactly, and I was looking through your poems, and I love them. I love all of them. But there's one here which is really, it resonates with me. Would you mind if I read it?
Oh, that would be wonderful. It would be a pleasure for me.
Because it is exactly what we're talking about, or what we were just talking about. It's called Because of My School Bag. The seasons change and life goes on, and though I know I'm getting older, it seems to me that short I'll stay because of the school bag on my shoulder. My bag defies all Newton's laws, and it amazed my teacher when I told her that a tornado could not blow me away because of the school bag on my shoulder. With it stuck to me, I lumber along to solemnly march like a war-torn soldier. To balance myself is the battle I fight because of the school bag on my shoulder. In just a few years, I'm going to look old, and I'll stoop and gasp while just carrying a folder, but I'll tell everyone, hey, I just look this way because of the school bag that was on my shoulder. That is so sad and so true. And it is true physically and mentally. This is exactly what we were talking about.
Yes.
Their heads are crammed with facts and data. There's no room for imagination. Their physique is, I mean, it affects every part of them.
Every part of them, absolutely.
So what were you thinking when you, I mean, was that
you know, definitely because my children were younger at that time when I wrote this, and they were going to school, and you know, you just would see the school bus, and you just see children trying to. It was such a struggle for them to climb those stairs because it's you know, it's quite a high. It was quite a high bus. So the steps that they were taking, they would take one step and just lean back, and then take another step, and you just would see that they are really battling against the weight of those books. And so that's what made me write this. And I thought, you know, it's such a tragedy that we're talking about all this academics, which of course we said we're not undermining the importance or anything, but then the balance that must be created to, you know, we don't want children made of wood.
No,
Yeah,
no, we don't want
them to be
robots. If we
thinking-
want computers, we can just buy a computer and program it how we like, you
Exactly.
know? But children are human beings. They're not the same thing.
They aren't.
And you can't, and it's not just these textbooks. And like you say, it's all about balance. It's not, we're not saying don't educate them. Educate them, but leave some portion of time for entertainment to grow.
So true,
you know?
so true. And then, okay, so this brings me to another, there are two things I want to talk about. Children bring home a school project. It may be science, it may be something to do with art, whatever. And they come home, they'll discuss it, that this is my latest project and I have to do this, so we have to go out and get this stuff. What happens is parents get involved, okay, which is a good thing, Somehow, the school project becomes mum or dad's project. And we have to win.
Yes, you have to be better than the rest of the class.
You have to be number one.
perfect. You have to be perfect. And it could be a project for an 8-year-old, but it's done, you know, if it's writing, there's calligraphy. You know an 8-year-old can't do calligraphy like an adult. And this need for parents for perfection at the expense of their children's development.
Yes.
I think that is it's fine to have beautiful things, it's fine to have perfect things, but if your goal is to facilitate the development of your child, you cannot do it by doing the project yourself. You know, you're not doing your own project. It's your child's project. Let your child do it. And even if it's not
and
perfect.
love the imperfections.
Love the imperfections. I agree. Love the imperfections. Love that your child did it, you know. Just don't worry about somebody else's child or the rest of the class.
So true.
And also, this also leads to the fact that if the child is helped so much that the project is no longer the child knows that. Your child is not an idiot. So how can a child be proud of something that he or she knows that they didn't make?
That is so important, that sense of achievement and satisfaction. You're taking away from it. Again, unconsciously, you're not realizing how much you're actually damaging them.
Yes, yes. And it's not because parents don't care.
It's because they care too much.
They care too much. Helicopter parents, helicopter parents. Well, which is why at the end of this book, there is a section for children to create their own stories.
Oh, I love that section.
It's a guided...
That is so important. Okay, there's a part of your book that I wanted to read out as well.
Oh, please.
Yeah, and I found this really beautiful, actually. What I wanted to show our viewers is actually the illustrations that you're doing as well. Beautifully illustrated and again, you know, what you're doing is you're capturing the child's imagination. So you've shown them an illustration, and then they're not just going to look at that. They're going to take it so many places. You know, that's wonderful. Here is what you've written here: the Cobweb Island. Once upon a time, in sunny California, there was a tiny island in the middle of a lake. The island was inhabited by many different types of animals. All day long, they played together happily. When it was hot, they swam in the cool water of the lake, and when they were hungry, they ate fruit from the trees. Life was good, and everyone was happy. That's such a lovely setting.
Well, that's what I would like to see.
Yeah, it's such a lovely setting, and it says so much. I mean, this is just the beginning, the introduction to the story. Tell us about the story as well. Are you talking about harmony and sort of tolerance as well in this? Where does the story go?
In this particular story, it is a story of how these animals who were living in harmony, then there was plenty to eat and drink, are visited by Yancy, the spider who creates trouble everywhere. And he somehow manipulates them. I don't want to give away the plot.
Okay.
But he manipulates them and he leaves the island not as he found it. Which is, again, as most of my stories,
symbolic.
many, many layers. Adults
Right.
will appreciate the
Right.
post-colonial element to that. But it is about the fear of not having enough food. In the beginning of the story, they are living happily, there's plenty to eat, there's plenty for everyone. But through manipulation, their fear of perhaps we won't get enough nectar, perhaps we won't get enough water space, that causes conflict. Because the spider puts this element in their mind.
It's so easy.
And it's very easy to manipulate people.
To exactly plant that seed.
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes, that's so true. So what you're actually doing, you're very cleverly addressing basic human survival instincts as well, and how that affects the dynamics towards our behavior.
Yes, and I think, I mean, this has all come from that class I taught, and because I got this feedback from ladies and gents who've lived for decades, almost a century, it became very clear that we have our fears, and that's the darker side of us. But then when those fears are taken away, there's a very, very beautiful side to human nature. So it depends what side you feed.
So true.
You know, and so when politicians feed the dark side, you see a lot of conflict. And so this spider is in this story like a politician, feeding the dark side. But then you have the prophets and the good people who feed the fearless side, where you feel that if I help my fellow human being, nothing will be taken from me. It will actually benefit the whole community.
You're enforcing the concept of sharing as well.
Yes, yes. Well, there's a lot to do with materialism, and especially nowadays, because I remember as a child we had a skipping rope and a ball and a few other things. Now we have millions of toys, and then for adults there are millions of things. There are lots of things, too many things, and so we emphasize those. So these stories kind of take children back to what's important: friendship, giggling cats and fainting goats.
Oh, I love the title to that. Yeah.
It's about friendship. It's about cats and goats being friends.
Yeah.
And those sort of values, the essence of the good aspect of human nature when we are not fearful.
When we're not fearful.
That's what I
exactly.
want to.
And also the simple things.
Yes. Giggling.
Yeah, exactly. Because we do tend to forget to do that, and to encourage our children to do that.
Yes.
Because it seems that everything is becoming so structured, and within that structure, I mean, if they're overwhelmed with getting up in the morning, because of course we're talking about Pakistan here. If they're overwhelmed with getting up in the morning and then, getting into their uniforms and then catching that bus to school or however they're getting to school, and then sitting in school and being swamped by too much that's going on. I mean, there's a young brain that is trying to comprehend with many things on many levels. And then you have one course that has so many books, and then they've hardly got through that and they're on to another subject. Then they come home with homework. Homework is not over and they're going for tuition to an academy.
Yes.
It's like we're burning them out at record speed. So by the time they're able to achieve their full potential, actually by that time, they're really exhausted.
Their brains are stooped, as you said in your poem. You know, the body is stooped with the burden of the bag, and their brains are stooped, and they have lost the ability to be creative because we've smothered it throughout their school years. And I agree with you. I think there has to be time out for our children.
And parents too.
And for
parents too.
Parents can't enjoy their children because they're constantly, have you done your homework? Have you done this? Have you done that? And
okay, and that leads me to another point. Exams.
yes.
You know, so many people I know that will absolutely shut off during their children's exams times, and it will be, the children have exams. And just, we cannot function as normal human beings anymore because, of course, they have to come first.
Yes.
What are we doing to our child by setting them up to believe that there's just one position, it's number one? Anything other than that is, you know, you just haven't proved yourself to me.
That is horrible for their personalities. It's like, if you haven't come first, you're a loser. And then you grow up with that sort of mentality, and you've got to constantly, and once you feel you have to be competitive, and that is the story you picked out, is this need to compete to survive. And it goes back to the caveman times of where if we didn't escape that wild beast first, we would be dead.
It's going to eat somebody.
It's going to eat, and it must not be us.
Yes, exactly.
We have to be the first one out of there. But we don't live in cave, you know. It's still, you can see how it follows, can't you?
Exactly, yes,
it's that primitive fear that is now embedded in children that don't need to feel that fear. We don't need to be first in the class. We will not be killed if we come second. So it's okay to not be first or second or third. It's okay to be wherever you happen to be.
Yeah, as long as you're doing well.
Yes.
As long as you're doing well, you're moving forward.
Yes, and we all have different brains. We have different strengths. I saw myself from the very beginning as a facilitator, not only for my children but for my students. Over the years, although I started as any teacher thinking that I have the knowledge, I'm going to stuff it in their brains, and they will do the exams and they will get 100% and I will be the star teacher. But over the years I realized that was wrong. You are a facilitator, you have to discover.
I love that term.
The facilitator.
Yeah, that's a lovely way to describe it.
Because we don't know what's in the other person's brain.
Right.
We don't even know what's in our child's brain.
True.
We need to bring out the best in our child, in our students. And if we don't give them space, if we keep telling them, no, you don't know what's the best, I am the parent, I know.
Are we afraid of hearing their views? Are we afraid of asking them? Are we sort of fearful of that too?
Yes, I think we are. I think because as the world is getting smaller, through the internet, through everybody has different viewpoints, we are so afraid that our children will not think exactly like us, that we don't want to hear their viewpoint. But what happens is that children learn not to give their view or tell us what they think we want to hear. And for me, that is the worst thing that can happen to a parent, for their child to have a double life.
Oh, yes.
You know, so for you they put on a show because they know you'll get hysterical if they say something that you don't agree with. But when they go out with their friends, when they're off at university, they are doing something totally different. So that's not it's not a genuine relationship between a parent and child.
Whereas a parent may think that they're spending a lot of time with their children because what they're doing is, in the morning they're getting them ready, they're driving them to school, they're picking them up, they're taking them to the academy, the tuition centre, and they're bringing them home and they're supervising their homework, they're making sure they're doing best. And at the end of the day, they may not be realising that even though with so much of that effort, everything going on, what the child really needs is a connection. And, that's in a way, it's something we need to think about, isn't it?
Yes, we need to listen to our children. We need to hear what they have to say, hence the portion at the end, for the child to have an opinion, because I have put down what I think is useful.
Right.
But every child has something else.
Tell us a bit about that, the interactive part at the end of the book.
At the end, because you know, children can write as they want, but I have put down questions like, who are the characters in your story? What's the main event in your story?
So that's your story.
It's
and
your story.
I think that for a child, that is so important, because they'll think, wow,
Somebody wants to hear what I have to say.
you know, at the end of the day, I'm important too.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I would like that. And of course, the pages are chosen specifically so they can write and color. They're not overly glossy. And so once they've done their brainstorming, there's a section where they can write the title and then actually write the story and create their own illustrations.
So you've encouraged them to sort of write their own little book as well.
Yes. I want them to personalize it. And I can remember as a child when I read storybooks, I would color in anything that wasn't colored. So I made sure that the illustrations, some are colored, because I like coloring too, and many of them are not colored, so they can fill them up as they like. So.
That's fantastic. Tell us about your work in Spain, US, UAE. You have an official title as well.
I do have an official title.
Tell us about that.
Education is my life. I've always been a teacher. I've either been a student or a teacher, and I have enjoyed both, because even as a teacher, I was a student. You know, it just goes that way. You cannot. I don't think you can be a teacher if you're not willing to learn.
True.
And so when I was living in Dubai, I was fortunate enough to start off the first art and design program at Zayed University. And because it was the very first in the country, and of course I didn't do it alone, I had support from the sheikh and from everybody who was there, but it was my brainchild.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'm very proud of it. But once it got off the ground and it was working, you cannot have creativity in a fishbowl. You have to be inspired. And so the Spanish ambassador in the UAE suggested that we take our students to Spain, because of that connection they have as Arabs, as Muslims, and the 700 years of Muslim rule in Spain. And he floated the idea, and our president said, "It's a good one, who wants to take it up?" And of course, good. So I took them to Spain, and it was wonderful. We worked with Complutense University, and we had exchanges of professors. They came to Dubai. We took our students there. One moment which was fascinating to the students was one of the professors, Maria Jesus, Spanish, Roman Catholic, I presume, gave them a lecture in fluent Arabic on the Muslim history of Spain. And they just couldn't believe it, because everybody's used to learning English because that's
an
the global
international language. Yes.
They couldn't understand why, you know, this Spanish woman would learn Arabic. And she said, because 700 years of our history is intertwined with the Arabic culture. And so we that developed, and our students came and went, and I came and went, and it was a wonderful collaboration. And we're still friends, and there's an official agreement. And because of this, the King of Spain, the then King of Spain, the father of the current one, he awarded me the Cross of Civil Merit, which is the highest civilian award that anybody can get in Spain.
Fantastic.
And I was...
You must have been so proud of yourself.
I was proud. My husband was prouder.
Yes, I know.
But yes, I was. It actually, it just confirmed that the path that I was taking as a teacher was the right path. I think Pakistani institutions also I know they do, and I think that is the only way forward. Students from every region have to meet up with students of other regions. We have to be a global community.
So true.
We can't just be Punjabi or Pakistani or South Asian. We have to be part of the global community, and we have to grow. We have to be creative. We can't. One of the things that my pet peeves is that with the curriculum the way it is, we are just getting our children to regurgitate things which have already been discovered. We don't give them space to create and discover new things.
True.
Maybe it's changed. I don't want to speak for the current education system. I hope it's changed.
Yes, you know, I agree with you to the extent that, you know, it's sad that we're spoon feeding them, and they need to be able to indulge in critical thinking and to be able to think out of the box, which is also something that is a very, very essential part of their personalities, of their you know, they're growing up.
Yes.
So as you mentioned, you know, that is so true, that just to observe the world on the internet gives you a distorted image of what really the world is all about, what humans are like, because then that, of course, leads you to stereotyping, generalization, and having a sort of a, you know, a very narrow viewpoint of what's going on. And as you said, that is not conducive to creativity. No. So that is a very, very important point. And it is very important to develop the critical thinking. And it all starts with answering a child's question. When a child wants to know something, it is our duty as a parent or a teacher or whatever, you know, whatever role you're in. When a young child asks you a question, they really mean something.
Yes.
They want an answer. So, you know, instead of giving an answer and then saying, okay, you know, be quiet, I have a headache.
Yes.
That's something terrible. You have to give them some form of an answer to what they want to know.
Yes, and then you have to ask their opinion. I think a very poignant moment for one of my students was, he had 3 children, 2 girls and the boy. Boy was the youngest one and he was about 4, and the girls were older and bossy. And one weekend, the grandmother took the girls and said, you come with me. And he said to his son, so what shall we do today? And the son didn't know what to say. Because he'd been so used to being told what to do by his sisters. And then my student said, you know, it occurred to me that my son doesn't have a voice in the house.
Terrible.
Now that he's got the freedom to choose, he doesn't know what to choose.
He's lost.
So I think we need to give all our children a voice, and we need to listen to their voice and then act accordingly. We cannot just, I think it's very arrogant of adults to say, because we are adults, because we have given birth to you, we know everything.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. No human knows everything.
And in fact, we're learning every minute of the day, aren't we not? I mean, there's something new to discover everywhere.
I keep discovering. I mean, this is what I do. I took early retirement and I just travel the world, meet up with people, and I plan to continue writing these stories. Somebody said, write one specific. This is set in California. Okay. Even though the themes are global, but it's set in California because I was living there at the time I wrote it.
Do write one set in Pakistan. That would be wonderful, because I think the children would absolutely delight in that.
Yes.
And unfortunately, you know, we're under time constraints. We're near to the end of the program. It's been wonderful speaking to you, Selma. I'd like you to give a message to our viewers, parents, children, whoever, you know, what can we do for our kids?
Well, I think, and this is just my opinion, I think that our whole life, everything we do is based on the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell our children, and that is what sets the infrastructure to who they become and who we become. So if we perceive ourselves as victims, we will actually start acting as victims, and then we will be treated as victims. So we have to be very conscious of the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves.
That's fascinating.
We have to be very conscious of the stories we tell our children about them, because that's what will make them who they are.
True.
And I do believe it's all about stories. And
there was a quote as well that you shared before we went, we came for recording. I just love that quote. Please tell us about
I love
that.
it too. I think it's perfect for this program. It's an American poet, Muriel Rukeyser, said it, and she said, "The world is made up of stories, not atoms."
Oh,
not atoms.
that is
and I
beautiful.
think I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. And we have to be so conscious of our stories. I think people just sort of write off fiction as something irrelevant and it's only physics, math, sciences. But the stories are what make us who we are.
Absolutely wonderful. Selma, Tufail, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. We've really, really enjoyed this program.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for giving me a voice.
Well, I'm sure many, many people are going to keep enjoying that voice as well. And we just can't wait for you to write your next stories set in Pakistan. And we'll have you on the program again then.
Inshallah, inshallah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so we've come to the end of today's program, one that I personally really, really enjoyed, talking about children, talking about, what they need, and for us to sort of change our perceptions as well. And that beautiful quote, that the universe is made up of stories, is it not? What is your story? What is my story? What story are we passing on to our children? So lots of food for thought in today's program. See you next week. Bye-bye.